make it happen, that's the goal.
And welcome to another edition of Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. I'm Sonny. And coming up on the show, we're going to take a look at kind of what's going on in society today through the lens of history as it pertains with, or includes, I should say, the history of Dodgers and Dodger Stadium. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, I know there's a lot of Dodger fans out there, and you might be in denial about the conversation we're about to have. How can you, to a beloved blue? But in order to really understand what's going on, oftentimes it takes conversation that is real conversation. I mean, we hear when it comes to immigration, we hear people talking about how can you be illegal on stolen land? Who got here first? Native Americans versus anybody else. And so you hear all this conversation. And of course, lately we've had the ICE raids, riots and protests, and other things going on. But when you take a look at it from a people perspective, the people involved, all people involved for that matter, how do you balance the rules of a sovereign nation versus the immigrants that are coming looking for a better life and having to deal with the recent history of a mass influx of people to the point where, according to some, there's a criminal element that's here. According to others, everybody is good. What countries do they come from? All these type of questions going on, and it's completely divided down the center to the extremes one way or the other. But I want to take a look at this perspective or this story or this storyline of society through a different perspective. Imagine, if you will, I'm sure you've seen it on TV, if not at a ball game or an event yourself. But a fan runs on to the field, running around for whatever reason, but makes the field. Eventually, that person's going to get caught. A few have gotten away, but most of the time they get caught. And then what happens to them? Well, they are arrested, probably, I would guess, charged with trespassing or something like that, a misdemeanor. Potentially banned for a period of time, if not forever. And that takes place. We think of an infamous one when Rick Monday saved the American flag from being burned back in the 70s. That's an iconic storming of the field. And you've got others. You had, I think the one gal was Morgana, and she would run out to the pitching mound and give the pitcher a peck on the cheek. And then she was escorted off. And so you've seen it a lot of times. You've seen people reach over the fence. I think there was an incident with Mookie Betts. They ripped the ball out of his glove. I think got banned for life. So again, when you are at a ball game or an event, you're expected to not run onto the field. If you do, you're removed. If you enter a stadium at one of these events, you probably have a ticket. If you have a ticket, you're only allowed to go into that section, mainly that seat, but that section. For example, if you were at a concert and you did not have pit tickets, now granted, some people do sneak in, but most of the time you're going to get kicked out of the pit. If you're at Dodger Stadium, for example, at one time it may have changed since the renovations and things that have happened, but at least when I was growing up, and I think the last time I was at a game, which has been a while, but if you're at the top deck and you had seats at the top deck, you couldn't go to the next level, the reserve level, or you couldn't go down. If you were in the box seats, you could move up and go to different levels, but your ticket would not allow you to go down. If you're at a ball game and you don't have a pass to the suites, they're not going to let you in. If you don't have a press pass, you're not getting into the press box. So again, you're limited to where you can go based upon the credentials, the ticketing, whatever they allow you to do. You can't just go willy-nilly wherever you want. And most of the time, there's going to be security or ushers or somebody to maintain the flow of traffic, make sure people don't go where they're not supposed to. kind of a structure, if you will. So you can only access areas that you're allowed to. In some cases, you have variables, but again, for the most part, the understanding is you have a ticket, you get to sit in that seat, in that section, and you don't get all the freebies of running onto the field, going to the suites, press box, and all that other stuff. So now imagine, if you will, you take a look at the immigration society that we live in. People coming here for whatever reason, some for asylum, some to get for the American dream, others maybe to have a criminal element. I mean, we've seen it on the news. We've seen gangs in Colorado. We've heard of many stories, so that might be an organized thing. In fact, when Cuba, back maybe in the 70s, 80s, allowed an influx of refugees to come to Florida, Fidel Castro opened up the prisons, sane asylums, allowed people to come in. I believe Scarface, the beginning of Scarface, the movie, explains all that too. But a criminal element was let out of Cuba into Florida. And now we have people from MS-13 and other gangs. I think just recently we heard about 11 Iranian nationals, including a sniper, got arrested by ICE. And so whether you're for or against it, we've had riots, we've had protests, we've had ICE agents being doxxed, we've had all kinds of things. We've had extreme. And what's lost in it are the people. And that's what we want to focus on, is the people. But first, I bring up the Dodgers because there was a story, and there's some ambiguity, perhaps, in what happened. A story broke on local news in Los Angeles that you had the members of ICE gathering on the property of Dodger Stadium. And so councilmen went out there, the news went out there, some protesters went out there, and it was pretty much, I guess, some unmarked cars with people wearing masks and guns. And now the Dodgers said that they tried to kick them off. ICE and DHS, Homeland Security, denied that ICE agents were even there, maybe Border Patrol. So there's a lot of what ifs, or who are these people, or whatever. And again, we don't really know because it was never even fully verified, even to the point where Snopes, whether you believe it or not, couldn't really verify or not verify what actually transpired. But we saw it on the news. There were some people there that looked like law enforcement, perhaps, or perhaps they weren't anybody at all. Maybe another criminal element posing as law enforcement. I mean, we saw this law enforcement, this person in Minnesota pretending to be a cop and assassinate 2 Minnesota state lawmakers. So again, we're in a society where it's really crazy right now. And again, what's being lost is the people. But I use the Dodgers as an example because there's a rich history in Los Angeles of immigration. It's a sanctuary state. Los Angeles is a sanctuary city. But not too long ago in the history of Los Angeles, or maybe it is, been 100 years or so, but you take a look at what happens to the history of the Dodgers. So now imagine again, you're at Dodger Stadium and you enter without a ticket. The Dodgers just recently gave a bunch of money to pro-illegal immigrant organizations. That's fine, if they want to do that. But again, when you're encouraging people to come here, and some people say, hey, you can't be illegal on stolen land, right? So keep that in mind. But when you come here, what's going to happen? Well, I saw somewhere, someone posted something about, like, if you went to Dodger Stadium without a ticket and you trespassed, they're not going to invite you in. They're not going to give you a meal of Dodger dogs. They're not going to give you the best seats in the suites. They're not going to give you free souvenirs. Instead, they're going to kick you out. Either kick you out and that's it, or maybe charge you with trespassing or whatever the consequences might be. But they're not going to accept you with open arms, even if you say you're the biggest Dodger fan in the world. You have to have a ticket, and you have to abide by a fan's code of conduct if you want to stay. Even if you're in your seat. A lot of times you might hear, harassing comments. You can be removed for that. Causing a disruption. You can be removed for that. I remember a time when I went to Dodger Stadium. I think it was Barry Bonds on his quest for the home run, whatever it was. I think single season home run record. And so I bought seats out in the right field pavilion. And this was the Dodgers-Giants heated rivalry back when fights were breaking out all the time. And I left because it was unsafe to stay there. Fights were breaking out. But again, security came in. You can't just get away with fighting. You had to fan a code of conduct. But I left. Security was there, but it became unsafe. So again, you do have to abide by a certain set of rules when you enter a place. If someone comes to your house, solicitors maybe, or maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons, maybe you don't even answer the door. You don't want them to come in. You don't want to talk to them. If people come to your house, they have to respect your property, right? So there's a lot of rules that are set up based on coming into a place where you are a guest. In fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger recently came out and made a comment on The View that said if you're an illegal immigrant or an immigrant here, you got to act like a guest in this country. Kind of shocking coming from someone like him. But again, you're not going to, if you go to Dodger Stadium, you're not going to get all the freebies if you don't have your ticket. But have you ever taken a look at the history of Chavez Ravine and Dodger Stadium? It's quite fascinating, especially in the context of what we're talking about today with illegal immigration and stuff. If you don't know, bear with me because I want to set the backstory. All this is the backstory and leading up to what I really want to talk about here in a minute. But the backstory is that the Dodgers moved into Chavez Ravine from Brooklyn, built their stadium, and that's where they've lived for the last however many years it's been. I think since 1962, something like that. Well, Chavez Ravine, located north of downtown Los Angeles, was home to several predominantly Mexican-American communities in the early 20th century, most notably the neighborhoods of La Loma, Palo Verde, and Bishop. As it says, these were tight-knit communities with families who had lived there for generations, many of whom were homeowners. So the area that Dodger Stadium sits on, Chavez Ravine, in these communities, used to be Mexican immigrant communities. Now, Chavez Ravine was named after Julian Chavez, a rancher who served as assistant mayor, city councilman, and eventually as one of LA County's first supervisors. In 1844, he started buying up land in what was known as the Stone Quarry Hills, an area with separate ravines. And then eventually he died of a heart attack in 1879 at the age of 69 because of his activism and all of his other activities involved in the city of Los Angeles. They eventually named that area Chavez Ravine. So it starts out, in fact, on the timeline, you can start out, I think, in the 1900s when early Mexican immigrants started to move into the hills of Chavez Ravine. About 1940 or so, early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, city officials and some federal authorities decided that they needed to redevelop the area, perhaps because it was poverty-stricken, a blight to society, whatever. They decided they were going to redevelop the area, and they wanted to put in public housing. And so, as the story goes, and you can go online, I've got some resources I'll share with you, but if you go online, you can check all this out and verify it, which I encourage you to do. Don't take my word for it. Go check it out for yourself. There's documentaries and other things that you can look at. But there's going to be a housing project, and the project was going to be Elysian Park Heights. There was an architect and everything that was supposed to create low-income housing that would then allow these residents to have a choice, one of the first choices of where they were going to live in this housing project if they wanted to stay. So the city used eminent domain, meaning that they were going to take your land in exchange for paying you supposedly fair market value, which at the time I think they were paying like $7,000 for these homes, which could be a lot of money at the time, and especially for these people that were stuck in poverty. Now, when the residents would get the money, they'd also have the opportunity to perhaps, pick a spot that they wanted to live in this low-income housing, this new development. However, there was the politics of things that came in, and some of the residents were forced to sell below market value. Eminent domain, you're supposed to get market value for your place, but some of them were coerced or pressured into selling under market value. Some people decided not to go at all. And then you had politics, Cold War, whatever came about, and the project dropped. So you had this property, this Chavez Ravine, and somebody buying up all the property for supposed low-income housing, of which most of the residents did not want to leave, but were coerced or took the money or whatever. A few stayed behind, and that's where it gets interesting. So this housing project collapses because some of the people involved in it were accused of being communists. So now the Dodgers come along, and they're looking for relocation because they had stadium issues in New York. So Los Angeles officials, eager to bring a baseball team to Los Angeles, in this case the Dodgers, they struck a deal with Walter O'Malley to give him 352 acres of Chavez Ravine for building Dodger Stadium. Now again, the land was originally acquired for public housing and was now repurposed for privately controlled stadium projects, such as Dodger Stadium, the parking, and I guess whatever else they thought at the time they were going to need. The agreement included a highly controversial land swap, which of course led to a public backlash, especially those that were more sympathetic to the displaced communities, kind of like what we're having today. The difference is back then you had legal immigrants, perhaps staying in an area that they've held since the 1900s, and now you have them being displaced and the Dodgers moving in. Although many families, they decided to move, take the money, do whatever, they got out. There's a few families that stayed behind. And then there was an infamous day in May of 1959 when this happened.
On May 8th, 1959, the remaining residents were ordered to abandon their homes. One of the last holdouts, a resident named Abrana Arechiga, tried to hold off police. Her daughter, Aurora Vargas, in images that made their way to people across the country, was forcibly carried out of her home. TV news viewers watched that night as the final families were violently evicted. Afterwards, right in front of the residents, bulldozers destroyed the last of the community.
So you had right there people being dragged out of their house. And if you're listening on the audio version of the podcast, if you go to the video, you can actually see video of these people being removed. And one of the ladies, is actually being carried out, kicking and screaming. And so you have these city officials then knocking down the homes, paving the way for Dodger Stadium. That was May 8th, 1959. And Dodger Stadium officially opened in 1962. But you had these images that captured the American interest. Now, how does it affect people? Because again, you had the Dodgers wanting to move here from New York, Los Angeles wanting to bring a baseball team here, sacrificing, or maybe at the sacrifice of Angelenos, who happen to be immigrants from Mexico that were there since 1900s, or the year 1900, really, maybe even before, because Chavez himself was in the 1800s. But if you look at the timeline real quick, you have in the early 1900s, Mexican-American families settling in Chavez Ravine. And then in 1949, so you have almost 50 years before the federal government approves funding for public housing. That was in 1949. Between 50 and 52, the city starts buying and clearing land via eminent domain, some forced or coerced to give up their land for less than fair market value. In 53, the public housing project was canceled for anti-communist backlash. In 57, the Dodgers announced the move from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. In 59, May 8th, that infamous day where the family gets forcibly evicted on television as one of the remaining homes get knocked down. And then in 62, Dodger Stadium opens on the former Chavez Ravine land. Now today, a lot of people are celebrating the Dodgers. They won the World Series in 2020 most recently. They've had a good team all these years. A lot of people from the Mexican community even embraces the Dodgers. In fact, when the Raiders left Los Angeles, all those Raider fans even became more so Dodger fans. And a lot of the people in the Mexican community, the Spanish community, are big Dodger fans, right? But then how did that eviction affect families and people? Because we forget about the people in celebration of a baseball team. And these were people that grew up in that area that lost their homes and witnessed it and describe it many years later.
It was very sad that we had to move away because we were like a big family. And a lot of my friends were there too, my cousins. And the one that really hurt me a lot was my grandmother. We were very close with her. My father bought property out in Lincoln Heights, and she couldn't go with us because we were too many.
I remember looking at my house. I knew I wasn't going to see it again. I just looked at it once, and I refused to look at it again because I knew I was going to break down. My mother was already all broken, and she needed somebody to be strong for her. My father built the house. I was born there. It had a vine growing, and it covered all the roof in the front. And in spring, it looked like it was wearing a white crown. So we moved away. It was gone.
Imagine seeing a house that your father built being demolished by city officials. Make way for a baseball team. I think of some of the Angelenos today that lost their homes in the fires. More so, yes, of course, the Pacific Palisades, but more so when you deal with the people of Altadena. A lot of those people come from immigrant families that lost everything, although not by force. I mean, it was, but the fires. But here the government comes in and pushes you out. And that's how it affects people. I have to be strong because my parents. We can't bring our grandma with us because there's too many people. See, when we talk about immigration, we talk about these type of things that go on in society, and it could be anything. Label anything that you hear on the news. That's a political issue. It deals with people, and yet people forget about it. And you can actually go and look up all kinds of stuff when it comes to the impact that it had. There's a book out there called Stealing Home, Los Angeles, the Dodgers, and the Lives Caught in Between by Eric Nussbaum. City of Quartz by Mike Davis. Videos out there. Chavez Ravine, a Los Angeles story from 2003. KCET put out a Lost LA episode on Chavez Ravine. And then there's been some play on other things, or just do an internet search of videos if you want to find out more. But these type of things impact people, but yet we forget about them. Because again, this was 1960s, 62 when the stadium opened, 59 on that fateful day, May 8th. Long time ago. People don't remember. People may not know. And yet you have the Dodgers then coming out with this kind of skeleton perhaps in their closet, and now pushing an agenda, political agenda, that really becomes hypocritical when you think about it. No, we don't want ICE on our property. Fine. We're pro illegal immigration. So they say. And yet, if you walk onto Dodger Stadium property without a ticket, try to get into the stadium, you'll be evicted, kicked out. We're anti-police, yet we have security everywhere. We're anti-Second Amendment, yet we're surrounded by armed bodyguards. Hollywood. So it affects people. And so when you take a look at how you have a sovereign nation and how you have human dignity when it comes to trying to work with illegal immigration, legal immigration, and keeping your country safe, a sovereign nation does have the right to enforce its borders and create immigration laws. Absolutely has the right. And if we're going to remain a sovereign nation, those immigration laws need to be enforced. And people need to realize that. Half this country does not care about our immigration laws. Half this country does not care about anything unless it affects or fits in to their political ideology. They don't care. They don't care what harm it does to people on the other side. More people care about TikTok, for example, when it went away in January of 2025 for that brief night or hours, than they do about all this other stuff. We've seen people put Ukraine flags, followed by Hamas flags, followed by Mexican flags, and now you have Iranian flags. What are you doing? But yes, you can enforce borders, but you don't have to be cruel about it. You can still respect human dignity, and you can enforce the laws fairly. It's okay to remove people. It's okay to kick people out. It's okay to get rid of the criminal element. We've seen video of gangs in Colorado. We've heard stories. I mean, the biggest story was that MS-13 gang member that was sent to El Salvador. Then he was involved in or accused of human trafficking. And for some reason, he is like the poster child for the left. A judge even ruled that he needs to be released from confinement for the criminal human trafficking. I think ICE can still detain him. They had to bring him back from El Salvador. Why is it that we want to violate the laws, the immigration laws? And a lot of people say, oh, it's due process, due process. Not really. It's just your hatred towards one man who happens to be in the White House and his agenda that a majority of the people voted for. See, we can have a free and moral society, and we can treat people humanely if they're here legally, if they're here illegally, or if they're seeking asylum. But if they come in illegally and it's deemed that they need to go back, they can be removed peacefully and in a dignified manner. But we've gotten past that because they're a political pawn in a game that has divided this country. There's people out there trying to hide them. Like people are trying to hide the Jews during Nazi Germany. There are people out there that are victimizing some of these people. You know, there was the plant in Nebraska that got raided. And here's the other thing, too, before I get to that story. Why is it that Democratic leaders such as Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, and others only think of immigrants as people that are going to pick the crops in the field, be busboys, make beds at hotels, and these other types of jobs? I know a lot of immigrants that were doctors, teachers, businessmen, professionals in their home country. I know some people that were doctors in their home country that are working as orderlies in hospitals here in America. I've talked with them. I've taught them. Why can't they be doctors? Sure, they would have to go back to med school. But why can't we try to push a pathway for that? Because they're pawns. So it's okay to have strong borders and compassionate policies. Should ICE be out there raiding the Home Depot? I don't know. Probably not. But then how else are we going to find them? Because again, we have an influx of who knows what because we don't know. If you're honest with yourself and you're a Joe Biden supporter and his administration, if you're honest with yourself, you have to come to the realization that a bunch of people came in here and we don't know anything about them. And during the Clinton administration, we had some people come in here that ultimately took down the World Trade Center. Okay? So yes, we do have to protect ourselves. I don't want anything to happen to anybody. We have to vet and protect people. But we wouldn't have to do these raids if people weren't out there protesting, if people weren't out there trying to hide them, if people weren't out there doxing ICE agents and fighting them. I think we have something going on where the president announced that there was money for self-deportation. We're going to pay you X amount of dollars, X amount of thousands of dollars to self-deport. That seems pretty humane, pretty generous, really. You came here and now you're leaving with money in your pocket. That seems like a humane thing to do. Instead of having an app promising people the world that if you come here, you get everything, be more realistic. Here is how you want to come here. If you're crossing the border illegally, or if you want to cross the border, come here and make your asylum claim. Come here and make your claim for why you should be here. Do it the right way. Don't come swimming across the Rio Grande and put a bunch of people at risk. Don't pay coyotes a bunch of money that then exploit you and enslave you afterwards. People should recognize the criminal element, but we can also recognize the need for the American dream. But there has to be a balance. Getting back to that meatpacking plant in Nebraska that got raided, apparently 60 some, maybe 68 people were taken, illegal immigrants. The very next day, all those jobs at that meatpacking plant or that food plant were replaced by legal residents, citizens, etc. So yes, when people say nobody wants these jobs, oh, there's a bunch of people that would like these jobs. There's a bunch of people that want to work that could use these jobs that are legalized. Here's the other thing that people don't realize, because you probably don't follow the story enough or do your own research or dig into it. But when you looked at these illegal immigrants that got the social security number or whatever to be able to circumnavigate the E-Verify rules, the people that gave them these numbers were now demanding payment. So they would get payment from these workers, illegal immigrant workers at this plant. Basically, they were enslaved to whomever gave them these numbers. And that opened up a big investigation into that. You talk about that MS-13 gang member, Abreu. Human trafficking. For some reason, people don't care that he was maybe involved in human trafficking. Why is that? Why don't we care about the victims of the people that come here? Why is it that the criminal element is always the hero? George Floyd. Should George Floyd have been knelt upon for 9 minutes? Absolutely not. Should the country have rioted? Absolutely not. Because what happened? The cop, Derek Chauvin, went to court, was found guilty, sitting in prison. That's how it works. But no, we don't see it that way. And then now we have to erect statues for a guy that was a pretty bad dude to begin with and had a lot of issues of his own. And there's example after example after example that could be brought up where we make the villain the hero. But again, we can recognize that we can have a sovereign nation and we can enforce our border laws, immigration laws, and we can respect people and treat them with human dignity. But there's some people that just don't want to. If you see a homeless person, whether on the streets or maybe going into the mini mart or whatever, do you at least acknowledge them? Say hi? Maybe don't want to give them anything, but do you at least acknowledge them, or do you hide? Don't make eye contact, because eye contact is bad. Human dignity. They are people too. You'd be surprised with a smile, a hello, maybe a bottle of water. I know businesses don't want people giving them stuff because then they just loiter about, but human dignity. When immigrants come here, the immigrant experience, we can humanize it. We see it as a political pawn. See, back in the 80s, Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to 3 million people. In return for amnesty, Congress at the time promised to fix immigration laws. Well, they didn't. They realized they can use them as a pawn in their platform, a plank in their platform of political ideology. And we've never gotten around to it. And when you think about it, you've got people like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Grassley, and a bunch of people that have been in Congress for decades. Why haven't they fixed the immigration laws? Remember when Joe Biden hired 88,000 IRS agents? Why not hire 88,000 immigration lawyers or immigration agents? Immigration judges, whatever, because they don't care. The government doesn't care, and they want you to take their side. We need illegal immigrants to do all these menial work, less than blue-collar job work, and then we want them to vote for us. And if you ask any legal immigrant that came here and did it the right way, they oppose illegal immigration, amnesty, all that, because they did it the right way. But we can avoid seeing immigrants as just another number or even a threat. All immigrants that come here, they're not threats. They just want the good life that we happen to enjoy. Because even the poorest of our poor in this country is richer than the rich in other countries. Go down to Skid Row in Los Angeles, there's people running around with phones. There's people running around with speakers, bikes. They get food. We have things in this country that other nations don't have. We have things like the rescue missions, food banks, GoFundMe. When houses burned in LA, GoFundMe's popped up. I got hit up 3, 4, 5, 6 times for GoFundMe. So we have the means, even in our wars, to be able to help others out because we're such a rich nation, a privileged nation, not in the white privilege sense and all that, but we are privileged to be here because we have those resources. Some of us lucky enough to be born here, others coming here. You've got American Red Cross, Samaritan's Purse, things like that that do try to help out the international community and others. But again, something goes wrong in our country. We've got insurance that can cover housing costs, car insurance to cover accidents, rental insurance to reimburse when we have to get our car fixed and we get a rental car. We have a lot of things that we can utilize, resources we can utilize to help us get through tough times. Unemployment if we're not working, food banks, WIC, EBT, SNAP, Medicaid. We have a lot of things at our disposal that these other countries don't have. Cuba, half the time the power's out to half the country. Can't do anything. And so we can understand that these people want to come here for a better life. We can understand their stories. And if you get to talk to them and get to know them, you can realize that. Their motives. I know many people that are here that have good, clean, pure motives. And I know a couple people that I've come across that their motives aren't so pure. But everybody can dream. A lot of people coming from the violence of another country, persecution, economic devastation. Cuba, Venezuela, for example. A lot of people from the Middle East. I know one student one time came from Iraq. Yeah, Iraq. And he was a member of the LGBT community. And when Saddam Hussein was running things in Iraq, nobody really cared. As long as you did not talk bad about the Hussein government, you were fine. Once the Taliban took over after the fall of Saddam, he had to leave the country because they were going through and killing LGBT community members. And he had to flee because they knew he was LGBT. His life was on the line. We can understand that. So we can value life. And by valuing life, we can still enforce our laws with compassion, discretion, and not just blanket punishment. Here's discretion for you. So there was a story about a girl, she was 19 in Georgia, got pulled over for a traffic violation when apparently she wasn't supposed to get a traffic violation, but got pulled over, maybe a DACA member, and got detained and was put into ICE detention. Now, you think that there would be some discretion when you look at somebody like that and say, okay, here is the situation, college student, this, that, whatever. Maybe we make some sort of compromise to allow her to re-enter society as she once knew it, but make some things along the way take place. I know one illegal immigrant in this country that had to go to court once a month. They showed up every single month. And now there's a future date in which the determination will be whether or not they can stay in the country or not. Okay. So there's things that can be done, but we don't spend the time or the resources on it because we're too busy. Here's another thing, just as a kind of a side note that I can bring into it. Remember all that money that Doge, the hated, dreaded Doge, discovered as fraudulent? And yet we cursed Elon Musk. We blew up and burned Tesla dealerships. We cursed his name instead of blaming the people that were fraudulent. USAID, extremely fraudulent, all these other things. And the millions upon billions of dollars that were discovered to be fraudulently spent. For all those people out there that want homes for the homeless, food for the hungry, immigration status for illegal immigrants, universal health care for everybody. If you take all that money that's being wasted and put it into these things, you would have enough money to cover all these things. So all the things that you're bitching and griping about, you would be able to have if you weren't so tied to an ideology and not so hateful to a man in the White House. We can have all these things. And why is it that the same people that preach against anything Donald Trump does, you can't do tariffs without Congress. You can't bomb Iran without Congress. You can't do anything without Congress, Congress, Congress. But the one thing they do not dispute, cry, protest against is the fact that Congress, in bipartisan fashion, passed a law signed by Joe Biden, or at least his auto pen, that stated TikTok needed to be banned in America because of national security issues. Donald Trump comes along and signs an executive order saying that's not going to happen. An executive order that a lot of people in the legal world think is a gray area at best, unconstitutional at worst, or vice versa. And yet they completely ignore that, and they're okay with him doing executive orders because, again, it benefits me in my narcissistic ways. I need my platform to spew my hate about all of this because we can't come together and have a conversation. How many times you scroll through and say, if you're a Trump supporter, just keep scrolling. If you're a this, keep scrolling. If you're a that, keep scrolling. This isn't for you. And then they go on and bitch about whatever it is that they want the people to scroll on about. And when it comes to immigration, it's been since the 1980s that this thing has really taken off. So what is that? Bunch of years? 40 years? Something like that? And yet now we're to the point where we can't even have conversations about it. But yes, we can be a sovereign nation. We can enforce our laws and yet treat people with human dignity. We can humanize the experience and understand and have empathy towards people and yet still enforce the laws and make them do it the correct way that they're supposed to do it. We can provide things like self-deportation for some money or other avenues by which people can leave this country. And we can make sure that the discretion is being used, but it goes back to Congress, and Congress refuses to do it. Plain and simple, because you are a pawn as an immigrant in a political ideology, and we, the people, are being played for one side or another because of the vote. Another thing we can do is we can enforce the laws justly. We don't need to be vindicated or be vindictive. Just enforce the laws. I know a lot of people are for family separation. I had a student, DACA member, whose father was here illegally, working construction out in Palmdale, California, Antelope Valley, was making pretty decent money because he was sending his two kids to some pretty good universities. He got arrested for DUI. His options were to self-deport that day or go to prison, go to jail, because I think it was a multiple offense thing. So he left right away, called his family from Tijuana and said, I deported. That probably could have been handled a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, we don't need people with DUIs getting off. There should be some penalty. So a suggestion was offered. Go to prison or deport. Most of us would probably deport instead of going to prison, but maybe had a chance to talk to his family. Did it have to be immediate? There was a consequence. The consequence had to be followed through. Did it have to be immediate like that? I don't think so. But that's the story I was told. So how do you separate the families? It's a tough question. Requires tough answers. And it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But yet, when we talk about separating families, you've got all these radical people out there on both ends that are sitting there and talking about the separation of families, tearing people apart. There's many videos I saw on social media of the sound of someone screaming. And it's, separating families. It's a political thing. It's an ideological thing. And the people posting those videos, they don't give a rat's ass about the people that are being separated. They don't. You think AOC gives a rat's ass about anybody? No, she doesn't. She only cares about herself, using other people as pawns. But we need to have some sort of, but again, it goes back to, we've had 40 some years of this, And we could do it if we wanted to, but we're not. We're not doing it. So it's up to you and me to help out where we can, when we can. And there's some people I help out, and there's others I just don't feel comfortable helping out because I don't know. That's just people in general. I'm not talking about even illegal immigrants, just people in general. But would something like a deferred action program work? I mean, how does that happen? How can we increase more immigration court dates? Because if the backlog is 10 years, are we really supposed to allow people to run around for 10 years? I mean, we don't do that for other crimes. If someone has a DUI and injures somebody, do we allow them to run around for 10 years? No. A lot of times people are held until either they're bailed out or until their court date. And then when they're convicted, they go straight to prison. We can look at it as a criminal threat first as a priority and then go from there. But again, we need long-term solutions that can only be done by Congress, and Congress isn't going to do it. And it doesn't help for you and I and others to fight about this because, again, where is the human dignity in all that? You're just playing a part of a game, a pawn in the game of immigration. I told you about that 19-year-old girl from Georgia. There could be some discretion used there, and there's many other people. But we don't have the resources for it. The MS-13 gang member. People were on his side. Oh, due process, due process. Well, you know what? Let's remove him because he is a danger to society. Now he's involved in human trafficking, accused of it. But we can remove him while he waits for his case to come up. See, people don't realize that it's okay to remove people until their case comes up. They don't have to stay here. Why do they have to stay here? Go back to your home country. When your time comes, that's just a fact of life. You have to wait in line. It's okay. That's humane. We're going to remove you, but when your case processes through, we'll bring you back and you can have your case. They don't have to stay here. That could be an option. Others, when it's an asylum thing, maybe that's a little different. If you're LGBTQ, IA, LMNOP, and your country is killing people because of your association or your identification or whatever you're doing, that's a different story. But if you're just coming here because someone said come here, and there's really no threat back home, well, maybe it's okay to go back to your country and wait. But again, the final thing that we really need to do is fix the broken immigration system. And if you really want to value and humanize and dignify immigrants, you've got to fix the immigration system, and only Congress can do that. And it's up to you and me to vote people in that will fix it. But everybody in Congress is too concerned with their own livelihood, their own means to get rich. They don't care about anything else. They'll say whatever they can to get reelected, and then they just go on living their luxurious life, the life of an oligarchy. AOC is a perfect example. When she got elected, she couldn't even afford rent in D.C. or Georgetown or wherever these people live. And now she's filled to the brim in her coffers of money, while her constituency and the people she represents, their community, is full of prostitution, drug dealers, blight. Look it up. Don't take my word for it. Our immigration system's outdated. It's unresponsive. There is a labor demand for some people, but we can't limit them. Can't limit immigrants to only these remedial jobs. There's a lot of bright people that can benefit not only our country, but perhaps one day their country. Think of all these Cubans that come here. Maybe one day the Communist Society of Cuba falls, okay? And we've had a lot of immigrants come here. And they're doing different things. Maybe they're learning a trade. Maybe they're going to school, getting educated. Who knows what they're doing? And one day Cuba falls. Communism is over. We need to restore democracy. Now these people go back, and they're the ones that are the educators. They're the ones that are building infrastructure. They're the ones that are rebuilding their country. That's another thing to think of. We want a better world that benefits all of us. some of these immigrants might be able to be in a position where they can go back one day to their own country and make their own country better. It's not always about us and our country. And yet we do have to realize, too, that too many people here are going to be a drain on resources. There's only so much we can do. The world, over 9 billion people, there's only so much you can handle. Sure, there's a lot of space, but if you build too quickly, too soon, infrastructure isn't going to be able to sustain. Food growth isn't going to be able to sustain. And you've got all these environmental wackos out there, not going to be able to sustain. Los Angeles is a desert. How much water can it consume? More and more people going there. How much water can it consume? The Colorado River is only so big. But again, we need to do it humanely. What about the backlogged? How are we going to fix that? How are we going to fix keeping people that are in legal limbo for years? Only Congress can do it, but we've got to create legal pathways that reflects today's economic and humanitarian realities. We got to streamline the legal immigration process for the workers, for families, refugees. I know a immigrant that's here, and her family, her daughter, family is back in the home country, separated. But they're trying to sacrifice now so that their daughter can have a better future. I can totally agree with that. Do I agree with the means by which they came here? No, but I understand it. And then how can we come up with a system where, okay, if we're going to keep people here, give them an opportunity to monitor them. And so, like I said, this one immigrant had to go to court once a month, show up. I don't really know what they did, but they at least showed up. And now they have a long-term, because of the backlog, they have a long-term means by which to stay in the country until that final determination is granted somewhere down the road. And there's a specific date, I forget what it is. But again, there could be a time where we're going to put you on the docket at some point, but you know what? You need to return to your home country until then. So there's ways we can do it. And then we've got to finally promote public understanding and civility. There is no civility, no public understanding. It's a political divide. And if you're a Democrat, you're this. If you're a Republican, you're this. And there's no common ground. The media, they're useless. They could help in having civic and civil conversations, but they're not. They demonize people and make it worse. Social media makes it worse. Churches can, I think, do a pretty good job with it. But again, we need to educate the public on how immigration works, where it fails, what the purpose is, what the intent is, what the rules are, all this stuff. And then finally, the final thing I'll just say about this is we don't need to make immigrants more important than the citizens. We don't need to give immigrants all the freebies that citizens struggle for. I know a lot of immigrants that make a lot more money in the long term for working less than what I do. Am I envious of that? No. But I recognize that illegal immigrants are getting freebies that Americans don't get. California is full of examples. Free health care for illegals, and there's other citizens that are struggling with health care. For one example. I know some people that were given money. Some immigrants were given money for like a whole year or so. They didn't have to have a job. They were just given money. And yet we have American citizens on welfare that can barely afford to eat. We have people that lost their homes in Los Angeles, in the hurricane-ravaged Southeast. And yet in Los Angeles, I think the last I checked, maybe only 6 permits were given for the Altadena area, something like that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was Hawaii. That was the fire in Hawaii, where only 6 homes have been rebuilt since the 2023 fire. Los Angeles, again, slow-moving permits. People are still waiting to get permitted. But again, you take that into illegal immigration, and you realize that there's a long haul ahead. It's okay to be a sovereign nation. It's okay to enforce immigration laws. It's okay to enforce those immigration laws with dignity and humanity. It's okay to make the people that broke those immigration laws have to abide by the consequences of that. But ultimately, it's going to take Congress. Ultimately, it's going to take congressional leaders to make that immigration reform change. And I just don't think we're going to have that in the politicians that we have today. This is Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. Check out our website, radiowarp.com. That's radio, W-A-R-P. You can click on the Two Steps Ahead podcast show logo. Past shows pop up. We're also, you can listen anywhere you listen to podcasts. Website is the best place to go, radiowarp.com. Again, radio, W-A-R-P. But you can also listen anywhere you listen to podcasts, the audio version. Video version, you can see on Rumble, on YouTube, on our website. You can do an internet search of Two Steps Ahead podcasts. We pop up. We're on all social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. You can find us there. And our website is Two Steps Ahead Podcast at gmail.com. That's Two Steps Ahead Podcast at gmail.com. Again, reach out. If there's something you need, let me know. If I can help you, I will. If I can't, maybe get you in touch with somebody that can. If you think that there's no one else out there, I'm that person out there. So don't ever think that. Reach out. If you need to talk, say hi, a voice on the other end of an email, whatever. I am here to help as best I can in any way that I can. And again, when it comes to illegal immigration, remember, we're all people. These are people. And we can't treat them anything other than people. But it is okay to be a sovereign nation and enforce the laws and expect people that come here to enforce the laws or to abide by the rules and the laws, just like the Dodgers would expect you to have a ticket in order to enter. And if you do something trying to enter without a ticket or go someplace you're not ticketed for or run onto the field, you will be kicked out. Same should be expected by people. Follow the rules and perhaps maybe, even though I'm not a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, or maybe consider what he says. If you're an immigrant in this country, behave like a guest. Might go a long ways. That's up for you to decide. As we go out, I'm going to play a kind of a montage. Might be a little unique for the audio version, but for the video version, give you a little something to reflect upon as we head out. Again, Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you. Take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom. Hey, thanks for listening. Do tell a friend. And until next time, God bless.
Viejo barrio, barrio viejo, solo en lugares parejos, donde un día hubo casa, donde vivió nuestra raza. Solo quedan los escombros de los hogares felices, de las alegres familias, de esa gente que yo quise. Por las tardes se sentaban afuera a tomar el fresco. Yo pasaba y saludaba, y aparece que oigo el eco. ¿Cómo está doña Juanita? Buenas tardes, Isabel. Hola, ¿qué dices, Chanita? ¿Cómo está Arturo y Manuel?